McMullen and McDonald here with you on Birds 365. Always fun talking to Mike Gill. Sounds like a good time out in Vegas last week on Radio Row and everything. Hanging with Joey Chestnut and The Rock. Well, he didn't say he was hanging with The Rock, but he saw The Rock, who certainly was a major presence last week, Super Bowl week, and the WWE being out in Vegas as well. Sounds like he had a good time. Good for Gil. Unfortunately, I'm the bearer of bad tidings. While Mike was on the stream with us, I got a text from our buddy Brad Spielberger, who also was in Vegas last week, and maybe we hung around with Mike Gill too much. I don't know what the deal is. Or who was the guy who didn't make it the next
Bert
day?
Kreischer, the comedian, who was hanging out with Jason Kelsey.
It might have been, maybe Spielberger was hanging out with both of them because he's paying the price right now. I texted me and said, you can't hear his voice. He is well under the weather and couldn't give us 5 minutes, let alone 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes like we asked our guests to do. We said, yeah, I'm not a good guest for you guys today. His voice is completely gone and shot. So we'll try and get Brad on, if not later in the week, maybe first thing next week, because it's funny. When I booked him on Monday, I didn't know that Haason Reddick was going to come out on Tuesday and say, for those of you who think I asked for a trade, I did not ask for a trade. The Eagles suggested I go out and see what my value is via a trade if there's another team that's going to be willing to pass. So the cap aspect of this story became even bigger. So Spielberg was even a better guest to have on today. He just can't answer the bell. He's under the weather, so we're not going to have Brad joining us, which is unfortunate. But John and I will muddle through as best we can to give you the cap standing. And here's what I think has been understated for this. No problem with the Eagles saying, first of all, them being the one suggesting to him rather than him asking them. At the end of the day, you get to the same place, so it doesn't matter much who started the process, who suggested it, that can be overemphasized. What I think has been underemphasized to this point is if they don't get something done, John, if either Haason Reddick finds someone willing to pay him and they won't come up with the price that the Eagles going to want to trade him and a deal doesn't get done and he comes back, they can't compromise, get a deal done. A $21 million cap hit for a guy who you're going to watch walk away the next year as a free agent. The Eagles just don't do business that way.
No.
They almost always get it. They either get a deal done or they move on. And a lot of people think that's harsh reality of the National Football League. Yeah, it is. Guys who can still play get cut because their cap number is just unmanageable. The Eagles like to do business, pushing money a little bit further down the road, and they gave Haason a big enough bonus when he first signed to make this a larger. He averages $15 million a year. It was a 3-year, $45 million deal that they did. Well, then why is he $21 million against the cap this year? Because that's the way they structured the contract. So they had easier cap hits the first 2 years of the deal. Well, it gets heavy in the third year. If you don't get an extension done and able to spread it out over a longer period of time, that's tough. $21 million cap hit is like the kind of money you want your quarterback counting against your cap, not an edge rusher counting against your cap. So Haason Reddick does have a little leverage here, John, because the Eagles
don't. No. If you look at the deal, so as you mentioned, 3 years, $45 million. Hasson's cap number in the first year was $3.9 million. In the second year, last year, it was up to just under $7 million. And obviously, you got to pay the piper this year to the tune of almost $22 million. And they have a void year next year, which is near $15 million, where you get to the full value of the contract. So year one, 1.7% of the cap. Year two, he accounted for 3%. This year would be 9%.
That's a big number for one player, 9% of the cap.
The Eagles don't want him to play under the bite. So there's a sense of urgency from both sides. to a certain degree. And since Brad is sick, hope you're better, Brad. If you're listening, hope you get better. He did do a story at PFF, I think it was yesterday, about 4 major moves that could shake up the NFL as free agency kicks off. Justin Fields being traded was one of them to Pittsburgh. Haason Reddick, because of what's going on, he had him going to the Houston Texans, who are now all of a sudden a legitimate contender. And, so their thought process is changing. And what he had coming back was the 59th overall pick, second rounds, but late second rounds, obviously. Is that good enough?
Better be. If Howie's going to hold the line and say, well, no, it has to be a high second round pick. You gave him permission to go out and find a team that's willing to pay him what he wants. And if that team doesn't have a high second round pick and you're saying, oh, we got to get a high second round pick in exchange, sorry, it's not going to work that way. And then he's going to say, all right, well, I guess I'll be hold on. I think I just pulled my hamstring. Yeah, I'll show up for camp, but don't expect me to be out there on that field. You said earlier he's a professional. He didn't do it this year. It might have been advisable that he did the holdout thing this year. Oh, if they don't get a deal done, John, and he's coming back and reporting for camp, he's not going to be playing. He's not going to be out there on the field. I think that professional nature of Haason Reddick goes out the window. If he gets an offer from a team at a dollar figure he wants, and now he puts the kibosh on it because they're not offering enough in trade, you can't hold it against Haason Reddick for being upset.
No, I can't. But ultimately, week 1, I'm not talking about training camp. I don't care about training camp. But ultimately, week 1, I think I shouldn't say unfortunately. I'm saying it facetiously, not for fans, not for the Eagles. But I think he's too professional to sit out games. I could be wrong, but everything I've learned about Haason leans me in that direction. Houston, interestingly enough, they have Will Anderson. Everybody knows defensive rookie of the year. So they have the other side, they have Jonathan Grenard, who had a pretty good season and is set to be a free agent. And I bring him up because Brad also does the free, and he's the best in the business when it comes to contract predictions. And I mean by far best in the business. And he's got Grenard as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 best edge rusher available in free agency. And his projected contract is basically Haason's previous contract, 3 years, $15.75 million, little inflation, $31.75 million guaranteed. A lot cheaper, maybe in essence a weird trade. Bring in Jonathan Grenard as a free agent. You're back at a more.
How old is Grenard?
He is 26.
Okay,
he'll turn 27.
That's the key aspect. That's the key element. Because I'm sorry, he's just not as good a player as Haason Reddick.
No, but he's younger. Yeah.
He's younger, and you're projecting over the life of whatever his contract is going to be. The drop off isn't going to be as predictable, and you have to at least be open minded to. Yeah, it may all of a sudden kick in with Haason that he's over 30 years old, and you do start to see the decline. If you're telling me he's going to be a $15 million a year player, I'd more take my chance with Haason Reddick being a $22 million a year player than I would with Grenard being a $15 million.
And another one now here's what I also like about Brad, because you're going to have, as free agency creeps closer, March 13th, 14th, I forget the exact date, but where legal tampering can begin. You should go out and get Brian Burns. You should go out and get Josh. They're getting franchised. All right. Right. If they don't work it out, They're not going to be on the market. So,
and what is the franchise tag? And see, this is where I'll fault the NFL, the Players Association, at least from my line of judgment. They don't have well enough defined positions when it comes to franchise tags, because Haason Reddick is unique. He's not a linebacker. I know you have to list him somewhere on your depth chart at a position, but you know he's not. I know it. I don't care what stupid Matt Patricia decided to do and have him dropping in coverage more often than they did previously. And yeah, I know you're going to say Fangio's going to drop him in coverage. Get ready for it, Joe, because Fangio's going to do it too. Less than Patricia did would be my prediction. It's the hard and fast money that's tied to your position just seems to be wrong. They did the players union needs to do a better job of negotiating that. Under what position would Burns be listed, and what would his franchise number be?
Defensive ends and 22.79, and Josh Allen as well, 22.79. Whether you want to call it edge rusher, they've actually, if Haason Reddick was in that position, they would consider him an edge rusher. So whether you want to call it defensive end, linebacker, do you
know that for a fact?
Yes, I do know that for a fact. Danielle Hunter.
Because teams have fought the fight before with linebackers.
Yeah.
Because the linebacker designation carries much less of a franchise cap number than does.
So they have clearly defined that from a contract standpoint of off ball or stacked versus edge rusher, edge defender, whatever you want to call it. So all the guys, like the Vikings play the Fangio, or did play the Fangio scheme. So Hunter turned from, they didn't play it under Flores, but the year before. So he went from defensive end to Sam linebacker, but he's still in the edge defender category. Your guy, Bryce Huff, is in there. Chase Young, Grenard, Jadeveon Clowney, Zadarius Smith, who's another linebacker type. Josh Uche, who's another, Leonard Floyd, Sam linebacker. They're all Andrew Van Ginkel.
Floyd now these days.
31. Andrew Van Ginkel.
32.
Played in the Fangio scheme last year. He's with the edge rushers. So yeah, they've at least got that right. But you're right. One of the things, it could be offensive line. It's offensive line. Tackles, centers, guards. You got to better define. They need to better define things, and for fans, they need to better define things. To be perfectly honest, it's one of my pet peeves. I see it all the time. Again, Fangio is going to play 3-4. Fangio is a 3-4 guy. Shut up!
Oh,
you just watched it for three years.
Yeah,
it drives me insane.
That's what I said. It's on Reddick, linebacker. You know he's not. I know he's not. The Eagles know he's not. Some people still cling to the belief that he is. And if you tell me that if the Eagles tried to go down that road, and it's irrelevant because he's under contract and we're not talking about a situation where he could have a franchise tag slapped on him, but that's a good starting point if I'm his agent. Listen, if we had only done a 2-year deal and he was a free agent this year, and you had the option of slapping a franchise tag on him, would you? And if Howie Roseman's answer is yeah, probably, well, then why don't we start at $22 million? If that's the franchise tag he's certainly a franchise tag level player. Anybody who argues he's not is ridiculous. Now, you get into the conversation of years. A franchise tag's 1 year, so you can just play for that 1 year. You're not extending. You're not looking at taking a drop off the cliff type year like Bradbury and then have to pay for it. Not only suffer through the year he's having, but then pay for it down the road thereafter with the way you structure the contract. I get it. 1 year is 1 year, which is usually a good thing for a team. But that's the value, isn't it? If you're looking at, well, we're going to try and hold the line at 20 million rather than close to 22, would you say it was 8, 9? The franchise
22.79.
7-9.
Yeah.
That's where I'd
And
start my ass.
Brad's got Josh Allen and Brian Burns as the top two edge rushers. And they'll both be franchised if their teams, respective teams, can't work things out. So the first guy on the market would be Hunter. The second guy would be Bryce Huff. The third would be Chase Young. Chase Young's interesting because nobody's going to give him a long-term deal. He might have to take that 1-year deal for 14, 15 million and go right back. Would you take a flyer on Chase Young at, say, 1 year? Let's see what Brad has him at 1 year, 15 million. Would you take a flyer on that? And, because that has some upside, but he takes plays off. I don't know.
Right.
He's got a lot of talent.
Here's the downside to it again. Same as Haason Reddick. If you're talking about plugging him into the Eagles, just in general, I'm not talking every single day. I didn't say that, but in general, they don't like to do 1-year deals because they carry a significant cap hit with them. Like Haason Reddick is scheduled to carry this year. Here's the problem. Not only are you paying him $15 million, not only are you using the valuation of $15 million, and you're taking up $15 million of cap space. They'd rather do a $15 million deal with voidable years thereafter.
Yeah, they could still do it, but they could structure it.
You asked me 1 year, $15 million.
Well, remember Howie does things in the case of, he'll also think about, well, if he plays really well, which you want, and he's on the market again, then worst case scenario, you're getting a third round compensatory pick if you manipulate things the right way. And again, you have to be in a position, and that's what Howie's really good at. He's not only thinking about 2024, he's thinking about 2025 and 2026. So you have that little fail safe, and who knows where he thinks he's going to be. He might say, no, we're gonna be impactful in free agency, and we're not going to get that compensatory. So a lot of things can factor into it, but there's a lot of ways they can go. And there's a lot of players that are going to be available. And again, I think the most obvious is Van Ginkel because he's got the history with Vic Fangio, and he's coming off a really good season. And he would be relatively cheap when compared to the top edge rushers on the market. So everybody went Brian Burns. Forget about Brian Burns. I saw somebody mention Brian Burns. You're not getting Brian Burns. Josh Allen, you're not getting Josh Allen. You're not getting Danielle Hunter. But when you start going down the list,
what do you think's going to happen with Hunter? The top two, you're right. They're never getting out of the grasp of their team. But they had hold-in issues with Danielle Hunter, and it is a different defense from the one that he had put up some pretty damn good numbers in. How do you think that shakes out?
Well, he's got some of the issues, Haason, because he's 29. So I don't think he's turning 30 this year. It's amazing. He's been around forever. He came in the league really young, and he's been really productive. But, Brad's got him at 3 years, 21.67. So 40 million guaranteed. So still pretty darn expensive. I think he had 15 and a half sacks last year. I mean, the guy's tremendously productive. I think he's leaving because Minnesota's got to extend Jefferson, and they have to either re-sign Kirk Cousins or figure something out at quarterback. I mean, that's number one. And Jefferson's not going to be happy if they don't have a high volume thrower. So they got a lot of issues. That's a bad GM, by the way.
Let me ask you about that bad GM. If Cousins, for whatever reason, they can't get a deal done with him, which I think they will. If I ask you, you ask me who's going to be the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings this year, I'd tell you Kirk Cousins. But it's not 100%. If not, could the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings be a former University of Minnesota player, Russell Wilson? Because we've all kind of forgotten about what the Broncos
Russ,
did to
well, he
Russell.
went to Wisconsin, Russ.
Oh,
Russ
excuse
went
me.
to
You're
North
right.
Carolina State.
Thank you.
Wisconsin. Boy, I don't think so. I don't. If Minnesota goes in a different direction, I think they're going to trade up to get somebody like Jaden Daniels. They're going to go young. They're not going to pay. They're not, because the issue with them
you don't have to pay Russell this year.
Well,
he's going to get paid from the Broncos. If he gets released, he's going to play for the veteran minimum. He's going to get to pick or choose wherever the hell he wants to go. And if he says, yeah, throwing to that Jefferson guy could revive my career, you could get Russell Wilson on a very cheap contract.
I would not want anything to do with it if I'm Minnesota. I would want to go young. If I'm moving on from Cousins, I would want to go young. I'm a big Cousins guy. I think he's maybe the most underrated quarterback in the league. Pat Mahomes agrees with me, by the way. But he's also coming off an Achilles, and he's 36. So how healthy is he going to be? And he's still getting $40 million, maybe. So I don't know if I'd go that way if I'm Minnesota, and I don't want another veteran. If I'm going to move on, if you're going to turn the page and go get somebody. But I don't have any confidence in that GM. I mean, his drafting has been abysmal. Been abysmal. And he's only been there for 2 years. Now, we did get Jordan Addison last year, who turned into quite a bit of player. The first year, I think they had the 11th pick. They traded down twice and ended up with Lewis Seen, who they're going to cut, hasn't been gotten on the field at all. And Andrew Booth, who's even terrible, has turned out to be terrible. I know they think about all the players they passed up on that year. Jamison Williams is the guy, Detroit, and they traded him to Detroit. Now, Jamison Williams was hurt at the time, and he hasn't turned into anything yet, but you saw him with that end around in the playoff game.
He shows flashes.
Oh, my God. Yeah, he's so and they wouldn't have taken a wide receiver anyway, but, that was the Jordan Davis year, Kyle Hamilton, on and on and on. And they took a safety. Kyle Hamilton's sitting there, and you got Lewis C. I mean, that's bad.
Hideously bad draft. I will agree with you on the Delfomensu on that one. He's McMullen, we're McDonald. We still got to get a couple breaks in here. In case you're just joining the stream, we apologize. We had promoted that Brad Spielberger from PFF and overthecap.com was going to jump in with us. Brad's under the weather. It wasn't that we didn't get the Brad or anything. He turned up sick. He brought something back. I thought whatever happened in Vegas was supposed to stay in Vegas. Apparently not. Brad brought it home and got sick, a little under the weather. We'll try and get him on later in the week or first thing next week. But Mac coming back. We've still got plenty of Birds 360